Oh, you damn right it is recruiting time, because it's always recruiting time. It never stops, and right now the Longhorns are in full blast mode. Maybe when Sark says all gas, no brakes, he was specifically talking about recruiting. It is the recruiting hour. We're getting ready for Texas and UTSA this weekend, coming off of Texas and what they did to Michigan. But it wasn't just the game, because during the post game, Texas gets a flip. We'll get into that. We'll get into a lot of other stuff and how maybe this class could go even higher. I'm Chad Hastings. That guy is the managing editor of orangebloods.com, Jason Sukamel. And Jason, you were on the post-game show with me and Catch. We're talking about Texas whipping Michigan. And all of a sudden you said, guys, Myron Charles just flipped. I got to go.
Yeah.
And you took off. So it really was this, and maybe that's not the reason, but an interesting timing for Myron Charles. And last week we had the list of possible flips that we went through, and your number one guy was Myron Charles. He flips in the post-game show. Let's start there.
Yeah, hey, we can get lucky every now and then, right? So, so hey, what's up to Money B and Sandman and Barbs, everybody in the chat? Thanks to our loyal viewers here. But yeah, Chad, that was funny because I have my phone, like even right now, I silence notifications, and I've got a couple texts out to guys right now, so I might be checking my phone during this video. But so I have my phone on silence, right? And somebody in the chat goes, Myron Charles flipped. And I was like, are they being serious? So while we're doing the post-game show, I hop on Twitter and I fire off a couple texts. I'm like, okay, this is legit. So like, got to get to writing, And as you said, we had him as the most likely to flip his commitment. It wasn't a surprise at all. The timing was a surprise. Obviously, I was not truly prepared for that on Saturday. What was it? An hour after the game ended, maybe. Probably in hindsight, I kind of knew it was coming. I probably should have had a story, excuse me, in the can and ready to go, but wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. I thought maybe after he visited for that Georgia game. So I did talk to Myron on Sunday, so the day after he flipped his commitment, and I said, well, just take me through it, how it went down. He actually committed to the Texas coaches. He said pretty much the entire staff on, I think it was Friday, maybe even Thursday. He said a day or two before. And then he decided to not announce it until after the Michigan game. He thought that'd be fun. Don't know what he would have done if Texas had lost that game, but it ended up not being a factor. So he just to add to the excitement, he said he just went ahead and announced on Saturday afternoon. He said he and his family had been talking about it for a while, kind of knew it was going that direction. And he was really classy. He's from Florida. He was committed to Florida State. He said, hey, it's nothing against Florida State. I love their coaches. I love the city of Tallahassee. I love the program there. He just said Texas has been on him ever since he committed. They've stayed on him. He's built relationships there. He said it wasn't a factor, Florida State being 0-2 and Texas looking really good. I'm sure that played a small part in it. But, yeah, really big pickup for Texas. He's 6'5", and we had him at 280 or 260 pounds, in the Rivals database. He told me he's up to 285. He still runs a 4.8 40. He said he thinks he's quick off the ball. He has good top end speed. Not that he needs top end speed that often, but he's a guy. And I said, tell me, Myron, what do you do? What do you bring to the table? And he said, well, I can play nose guard, 3-tech. I can play defensive end, whatever they need. I think he's going to be an interior guy. That's where Texas needs him. He's up to 285 pounds. You can see him getting over 300 pounds. I think he'll be an interior guy. That's where Texas is trying to stockpile bodies right now. But really good pickup for Texas. Rivals 250 member. All the in-state schools, Miami, Florida State really wanted him. If you look at his offer list, Alabama, Ohio State, everybody offered this dude. So really good pickup for Kenny Baker, really good pickup for Texas in general.
So, Jason, he's a guy that you would say, even if you're watching film, you might see all of it at or a lot of it at D end, but you think the frame and how he'll grow into that's going to get him on the inside and be a D tackle.
Yeah, he does a little bit of everything on film, but I think ultimately in college, he's 285 and he's still got, 3 months of high school left. I did not ask him if he's an early graduate. It's a question I forgot to ask him. I can get that answered, but I'm assuming most guys are anymore. Now, I just assume everybody's an early graduate anymore, right? Most of them are at this point. So, yeah, I think ultimately just the way his body will develop. I mean, you look at Tavondre Sweat and Alfred Collins. I mean, Tavondre was a different animal, but believe it or not, Tavondre was classified as a defensive end coming out of high school. So, but Alfred Collins was a defensive end. Vernon Broughton, I think, was a defensive end. These guys come in at 285, at 6'5". They're going to mold his body. He's only going to get bigger, stronger. So I think he'll be an interior guy pretty much exclusively.
Yeah, we used to say things like, wow, look at that. 4 guys are going to be early enrollees. And now we say, how many are early enrollees? 20.
Yeah,
20,
exactly.
22.
I think I don't remember the exact number, but I think last year all but like 4 or 5 were early enrollees. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Jason, I just want to flash up real quick a little bit, just a snippet of your 3-2-1 article. You kind of referenced this, but I think it's worth going over again. This to me is such a modern recruiting thing. And Sark understands this, and every other coach in America is understanding it if they don't already. But what you got out of Myron Charles, I thought was so telling. And here's the quote you put in there. It was just the way that Texas has been on me since I committed to Florida State. They never stop showing interest. Nothing bad about Florida State. And then he goes on to kind of explain, but that jumped out to me, Jason. I'm like, wait a second. The old ways was as soon as you're a commit, the other schools are going to be, respectful. We're going to stay away. Mac Brown, right? Can't be partially pregnant. If we're dating, we're dating, right? If we're married, we're married, and all that stuff. This is a kid that says, no, I'm a badass. I make my choice. But if you're a big dog, if I care about you, you better not go silent at that point. You need to stay on it. Like, that is a huge indicator of the way some of these not that they all feel that way, but that a big time 4-star like this feels that way. I thought that was interesting.
Well, let me tell you the flip side of that. I asked Myron, I'm sorry, during my interview, and I didn't write about this, but I did say, hey, where do you go now? Do you completely shut things down? He goes, I don't know. We'll see. So,
it's not even over now, right?
No, exactly. It's not even 100% over now. But, Sark in this staff, as much as any other staff, they do a really good job of staying on guys after they commit. And some of that is because they have a history of having success late in the cycle. Okay. So they're not like, hey, if a guy commits to Oregon or Ohio State or Florida State or whatever, let's stay on them. Some of these guys might have some change of hearts late in the cycle. The other side of that, and Sark has said this, I think in one of his press conferences, dude, some of these guys that you miss out on may hit the transfer portal in year 1 or year 2, So you don't want to burn bridges. You want to keep those lines of communication open. Once they sign their letters of intent, then you can no longer do that. But, why not stay in touch with them? Sark does a great job with that. His assistants kind of take his lead. I think probably, like you said, Chad, most schools do it, but I think Texas probably to another level, and they do it in a good way. They don't pressure these kids. They just check in with them and say, hey, man, just seeing how you're doing. How's your family? Hey, happy birthday, whatever. It's not, hey, I saw you had a great game this week. I saw your clips. It's not all about, dude, come to Austin, come to Texas, come visit. We'd love to have you on our team. It's just kind of building relationships, continuing to get to know these guys, their families, their coaches. So, yeah, Texas does a really, really good job with that. That's why you've seen Texas maybe as much as any other school. Texas maybe doesn't load up early in the recruiting cycle. We've seen that this year. But late in the cycle, including last year with a lot of late flips, that's why Texas does such a good job there.
That's interesting. It's funny, Jason, as you were talking, I went back to a moment long ago when I was doing Texas women's basketball games and traveling with the team. I remember getting on the bus one night and an assistant hands Jody Conrad a phone and told her it was, hey, this is blank, big time recruit. And I remember hearing Coach Conrad's conversation, just her side of it. And it was all about kind of what you're talking about. Since you're in the middle of the season, it was sort of, did she see the game, the Texas game? Texas had won the game. And then it was also, hey, saw what you did in your game. How are things? And it was just all of that. I didn't hear one word out of Jody about, hey, are you going to come? Are you coming? It's just checking in.
Yeah. And those conversations happen at some point. Like, hey, by the way, if you want to come in for the Georgia game, we got a ticket for you. We'd love to see you and your family. Yeah. But you got to build relationships and build trust. I had a really good conversation last night, or yes, yeah, I guess last night with Raja Bell, Dia Bell's dad, Raja Bell, former NBA player. And I'm going to hold that conversation. It's a shameless tease here, but for my column next week, because I think it was really good and wasn't super time sensitive. But a lot of the same deal. He just said, just there's a comfort with those Texas coaches, AJ Milwee, Steve Sarkisian. Never put a lot of pressure. And he said, hey, tons of schools recruited his son, pretty much everybody. They visited tons of schools. And he goes, we kind of let Dia make his own decision. And Dia came to us and basically said, hey, one day, I think I want to go to Texas. And mom and dad were like, yes, let's do it. Let's go ahead and get a commit. And I said, well, that's good. I said, I've got teenagers and sometimes it's hard, that balance. You want them to make their own decisions. But you also want to give them some guidance. And he goes, oh, don't get me wrong. If he would have come out and said, I want to go to this school, it would have been like, hold on, we got to slow down. We got to sit down and talk about this. But he said, when he said that he wanted to go to Texas, Raja and mom were 100% on board.
Interesting. All right. Recruiting Hour rolls on. If you want to jump in and throw us a super chat, it'll go right to the top of the list. Also want to give a little love to the good folks at Texas Card House. They sponsor Jason's 321 article every week. Go check it out. The stuff with Myron Charles, some of the other stuff that we'll get into today. Shout out to Texas Card House. 6 locations in Texas, and they have upgraded all of them. Check out TCH Social Austin. That is right there at that 183 and Anderson Mill location. If you've been to Texas Card House before, it's even better. And if you've never been, you have got to go check it out. Thanks to Texas Card House for all of their love. And once again, that 321 article of Jason's is right there for you at orangebloods.com. Get it taken care of. Get that article. And you got War Room coming tomorrow night on a Thursday night. And have orangebloods.com all set up and ready to go for when Texas hits the SEC with that Mississippi State game coming up in a couple weeks. All right, Jason. So there was the flip in the post game, as we mentioned, with Myron Charles. Then another guy that we talked about last week, I believe you made him number 4 on the list in terms of maybe likely flip guys to watch. This is number 1 D end in the country, according to Rivals and others. This is Javion Hilson. He was a verbal commit to Florida State, and all of the sudden, I'm sure it had nothing to do with football that he was seeing on the field. Hilson decides, open up the commitment. He decommits from Florida State. Give me the latest on Hilson, because this is an even bigger get than Charles.
I didn't remember I had him at number 4. Who did I have at 3 and 2? Do you have that in front of you?
Malcolm Simpson 2 and Caleb Bell was 3.
Okay. If Texas pushes for Malcolm Simpson, but a lot of that will now depend on what happens with Javion Hilson. Same with Bell, but Hilson, tremendous player. Okay. Obviously, like you said, Rivals 5-star, number 15 nationally. Sunday afternoon, he just put on Twitter very respectfully, but hey, he's going to decommit from Florida State. And he kind of worded it in a way where it's like, okay, I'm moving on from Florida State. It didn't sound like I'm going to keep my options open with Florida State. I can't remember the exact wording of his tweet, but it was like, thanks for everything. See you later. I'm going to go check out some other schools. He did visit Texas in June. Now, this is important because he originally was committed to Alabama. Then he committed to Florida State. I think it was in January, of this year. So he's been committed to Florida State for 5 months. He takes an official visit to Texas in June. And I talked to him leaving that visit. And he said, you know what? It's basically Florida State and Texas in a dead heat. Mm-hmm. It's going to be one of those 2 schools that I'm going to commit to. So for all intents and purposes, he was basically uncommitted. Now, he ended up taking his Florida State official visit after the Texas visit, and that kind of reaffirmed things up for him. So, but now that he's decommitted, and it just happened kind of a random Sunday afternoon, like, okay, I'm decommitting. I was like, oh, didn't see that one coming necessarily. Not surprised that he decommitted necessarily, but the timing sometimes of these things can catch you off guard. But he's actually going to the Florida game this week when they're hosting Texas A&M. He's supposed to be, he said he's going to be at the Texas game for the Georgia game. Okay. Now there have been conflicting reports of Georgia or Mississippi State. We're trying to get that resolved, but he's going to be at a game for Texas. He's supposed to take an official visit to Texas A&M for when they play Texas. He's got like 5 or 6 schools he wants to visit now. So I think Alabama and Georgia are in the mix there. So on the surface, when he first decommitted, I was like, okay, this looks great for Texas, right? Because they were neck and neck. It came down to Texas and Florida State. But he's saying, hey, I'm not going to make any final decision now until December. And obviously, if he's supposedly, if he's going to still take that A&M official visit, what is that, late October or late November, excuse me, then he's probably not going to make a decision until December. So there's a lot of time, Chad, for this one, for some moving parts, and these other visits could shake things up. But obviously, Texas, as it stands coming out of his decommitment, Texas is in as good a spot as anybody. So if he does, in fact, come in, especially if it's that Georgia game and Texas puts on a good performance, and just obviously the atmosphere is going to be good. I don't think he's going to shut it down. He seems pretty intent on waiting this thing out till December, but I certainly think Texas is going to be a strong player, maybe even the leader as things stand now, with the understanding, hey, we got 3 months to go before he's ready to make a final decision.
All right, Jason, I got some math for you to try to get Texas to a #1 class. But before that, you mentioned the game in November. It just hit me. By the way, as we record today, 80 days until House Divided gets back together. 80 days until the Longhorns and the Aggies. In the old days, Jason, that game would occur and then signing day is February. But now more of the signings happen in December. Think about how close that game's going to be. Every other year.
What's the date of that game? I should know that. What's the actual
November
date?
30. November 30th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So think about it. Every year, the home team has one last regular season recruiting opportunity to bring guys in, but it's going to be in November, later November, and you've got mid-December as the signing day. So just kind of something to keep in mind. Another reason that a way that rivalry's kind of changed a little bit, because it's a little more immediate in terms of decision making.
Yeah, and the signing day's even been moved up. I should know that.
Is that right?
Yeah, signing day. Sorry, I'm trying to Google it, but February 7th. So it's like a week after that. So
February 7th. Well, what's the one in December though?
Oh, what am I saying? February 7th. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is it December 7th?
When I say February 7th, what am I? December 4th. December 4th. Okay. I knew it was that first week of December. Yeah, but I couldn't remember exactly when.
Whoa. Okay. Even more to the point then, if it's the 4th, my goodness.
Yeah, so you're talking midweek the week. So I'm guessing that's probably a Wednesday, the Wednesday after that game. So November 30th is the game. Yeah, Wednesday after that game is the first signing day. So
that's before the championship games.
Yeah, which is kind of why they did it. They didn't want coaches having to mess with the transfer portal and signing day and everything while they're getting ready for championship games. So yeah, the Wednesday after that regular season finale will be signing day. So
interesting. All right, so Jason, if I'm a Texas fan, I'm trying to put something together to make Texas fans really happy, because we've been talking about class rankings. They ask you all the time, Jason, can we get to the top 5, man? Can we get to the top 5? Well, guess what, Texas fans? You're in the top 5 now. You're up to number 4. So Jason, let's see if we can get it from 4 to 1. Back to Javion Hilson. If Hilson makes that visit for the Georgia game, if he really likes what he sees, if he ends up picking Texas, and if Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, got it, the #1 outside linebacker in America, makes the trip, he says he's going official visit, right? The Georgia weekend?
Yep, official visit.
If he comes in, falls in love with the burnt orange, and he picks Texas, those two guys, where does that get the class? Does it move up?
It moves up, but it's not going to be #1. It would probably be, I would say 2 or 3, certainly.
Okay.
Here's the deal. We're talking about getting to #1, right? We're swinging for the fences. We're trying to knock it out, literally out of the park, not just over the fence, out of the actual park. Ohio State, Chad, they got 26 commitments. They have 5 5-star commitments. Texas has 2.
Okay.
They have 19 4-stars. Texas has 12. I looked at the top 100, okay? Ohio State has 11 in the top 100. Texas has 5. Ohio State has 5 in the top 25. So if you're talking getting to #1, there's only one way I see that happening. They're going to have to get the guys like you're mentioning. They're going to have to steal someone like Riley Pettijohn from Ohio State, because you're not going to have to only increase Texas's class. You're going to have to punch Ohio State and knock them down a little bit. So
okay, so let's add another defensive guy. So Hilson, Owusu Boateng and Riley Pettijohn flips, does that get it to 1, or does that just keep it at 2?
I don't know the exact math, but that would be really, really close in the
That's
Rivals
close?
rankings, because that would put Texas
Okay.
at we're adding 3, right? Yes, that would put Texas at 5, and then Ohio State then goes down to 4 5-star rankings.
Mhm.
Now, Ohio State has higher ranked 5 stars than Texas. They have the number 1 player in the country, in fact, committed to them. So it would be close, Chad. I don't know that would get them there, but that might do the trick. And then, Texas still could add another 1 or 2, or maybe another flip somewhere. I mean, obviously, a DeCorian Moore, that gets it done, of course. But
Okay.
yeah, it would be really, really close and not unfathomable. I don't think Riley Pettijohn is going to flip, especially if they get Owusu Boateng. I actually asked Riley last week. I said, "Hey, dude, I know you're happy with your Ohio State commitment, but I said, is Texas still in touch with you?" He never responded. And Riley's usually pretty good about responding to me, but he's been up there multiple times since he committed. He and his family on Twitter are so pro Ohio State. So I think it's going to be tough to flip Riley Pettijohn, but any scenario where Texas gets to number 1, I almost think it'd have to include flipping Pettijohn, because that obviously gives you a big win, but it also takes points away from Ohio State.
Okay, before I add a couple more guys to try to get it to number 1, you just mentioned something. Owusu Boateng and Pettijohn in college, are they the same position for you, or is Pettijohn a safety?
No, they're both linebackers. Pettijohn's athletic enough to be a safety, but yeah, they're both going to be linebackers.
They're both going to be okay. Gotcha.
Maybe
So
they're both true linebackers. That's it.
So one's decision could affect the other. Interesting.
Could
Okay.
be, yeah.
All right. So let's do all that, Jason, and then let's talk about receivers. You just said DeCorian Moore. If those 3 defensive guys ended up at Texas and DeCorian Moore then flips from Oregon, does that get it to number 1?
That's easy number. You're talking Pettijohn's one of those 3, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's easy number 1, because that puts Texas at 6 5-star players. They've got the number 4 player in the country in DeCorian Moore. Yeah, I think that would easily, and again, you're taking Riley Pettijohn, who is number 14, would be on Texas's list off of Ohio State's list. Javion Hilson's 15, Jamie French is 16, Owusu Boateng is 18, Jonah Williams 20. Then you're talking Texas having, I lost count there, but 5 or 6 of the top 20 players in the country. They'd have, I think at that point, 2 more 5-stars than Ohio State. Now, Ohio State's got Tavian St. Clair, the number 1 player in the country, quarterback, and their next highest one is Devin Sanchez at number 6 in the country. So Texas would have 6-4 over Ohio State. Yeah, that puts Texas at number 1, probably by a pretty decent margin. And then we're talking about this being potentially one of the all-time recruiting classes, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, let me give you one more path idea. Let's take DeCorian Moore away and say he stays at Oregon. What if it's a different receiver? What about Michael Terry? Could Michael Terry being inserted with the Pettijohn flip and others, would that get Texas's class to number 1 for you?
Good. That's a good question. Tougher one to call, because Terry is, for Rivals rankings, I think he's right at number 90, if I'm not mistaken. So he's not.
Is he high 4-star or is he 5-star?
He's high 4-star. He's not a 5. Some other networks have him as a 5-star. Rivals has him as a high 4-star. So So in that scenario, we're flipping Pettijohn, right?
Yep.
So that takes 1 from Ohio State, adds to Texas. We are adding Javion Hilson.
Yep.
We're adding Owusu Boateng. So that's number 15 in 18. And then you're adding Terry, who, let me double check, that is 91. He's number 91 in the Rivals ranking.
Okay.
That would be close, because they still have, Ohio State still has St. Clair and Devin Sanchez, 2 of the top 6 players in the country. I think it'd be close, but I think I would give the nod to Texas, just because that whole the Pettijohn swing would be huge. Ohio State's going to lose a lot of points, because it's a whole mess of a system. But I mean, I shouldn't say it's a mess, but it's a very complicated system. You get bonus points for 5-stars and this, that, and the other. So they would lose a lot of points in their recruiting points total, whereas Texas would then gain those points by adding Riley Pettijohn. To put it in perspective, right now, Texas is at 25-46. Okay, right, nipping on Texas at Texas' heels is Auburn at 25-30, Georgia 25-29. So we're talking, small variations between those guys. Texas is at 25-46. LSU 27-61. So you're talking 220 points more than Alabama 27-65. Only 4 points more. So second and third are really close. They're at 27-65, Alabama, number 2. Ohio State's at 32-48. They're 500 points against number 2, above number 2. So it's a big gap, not just from Ohio State to Texas, from Ohio State to number 2. So there's going to you would have to include, as I said, Riley Pettijohn or Devin Sanchez. Something's going to happen where Texas gains a player and Ohio State loses players.
There you go. All right, more on Michael Terry. Plus, there's a guy making a decision this week that we will talk about in the recruiting hour. Right now, let's take a breath and let Lisa tell you about Specs.
Specs same-day delivery can save the day with our Specs app or online shopping. From world-class wines to hard-to-find spirits and craft beers to gourmet foods, delicious snacks, and spectacular sweets. It's Specs. Cheers to savings.
All right. Remember, 6 o'clock kick for Texas, but get all stocked up this week at Specs because there's some good early games too. Bama at Wisconsin. LSU is at South Carolina, which feels a little different now after what South Carolina did. That's where game day is this week, if I'm not mistaken.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, and 11:45, Jason, a game I'm really interested in. Last week, it's the 11:45 SEC Network game. It's where A&M and McNeese were last week, but this week it's Boston College at Missouri. Boston College just snuck into the rankings. They whipped Florida State up and down the field, and Missouri has, this will be a test. I didn't think Missouri really had a non-conference test, but maybe they do. And maybe this tells
at Missouri, Missouri,
yeah, and they're home. So
Missouri's really good. That offense is really good. They got good quarterback, good receivers. We'll see if Boston College can keep up. What time's that A&M Florida game?
A&M Florida is a 2:30.
Okay, good. So I'll get to watch that.
So that'd be a lead-in for Texas fans if you want to peek in there. That's a 2:30 lead-in, and then there's another nice 2:30 game with some ranked teams. Who's that? It's Notre Dame, Purdue, Hudson Card. Anybody?
Okay.
That's 2:30. OU plays at 2:30 against Tulane. Civil War is 2:30 at Oregon State, and the Apple Cup is also 2:30. Washington State. So there's a lot in that mid afternoon.
I'll be glued to that A&M Florida game. Like I got after Lagway. I know they played Samford, but boy, DJ Lagway, what a freshman debut for him. So I haven't paid attention. Maybe you have. I don't know if Lagway's been named the starter or not. But,
yeah, that's a good question. I'm assuming
I would sure think so, but I'm curious to see what he can do against a better opponent. And that's in Gainesville. So that'll be a game I'll be glued to before the Texas game.
Yeah, it's a big one. Loser's going to get a lot of flack off that one. Whoever loses that thing will get a lot of hell with 2 losses already. All right, let's get some chats questions in here, and then we'll talk a little more Michael Terry. This one came in first, Jason. Update on Faramo. How are we saying this one?
Yeah, Madden Faramo, the linebacker out of California. Yeah, Eric, not much new. We're kind of in a waiting game with him. We have been for a long time. There's talk that he's going to get back for a Texas game. I need to hit. He's not super responsive, but his mom sometimes will respond to me. So I'm glad you suggested that. I may hit her up today and just say, hey, do you guys have any upcoming games that you're going to visit? So that's been Notre Dame in Texas for the longest time. Now it's kind of shifted. It's Notre Dame, USC. His family, there's talk that his family wants him to stay out in California, closer to home. So USC has really surged there. I remember I talked to some USC people. I talked to some Notre Dame people recently. Notre Dame's pretty nervous. Now, 3 months ago, they were nervous about Texas right after he took his Texas official visit. Now they're nervous about USC. So I've got Texas still very much in the mix there, but I think Texas is running third. They're going to have to get him back on campus. Now, all that being said, there has been talk about him returning to Austin for a game for an unofficial visit. Same with Notre Dame, same with USC. But if they could get him back in, let's just say for that Georgia game, maybe, hey, okay, they can't. He wants Notre Dame. Mom and dad want USC. Hey, guys, Texas is kind of in the middle there in terms of geography a little bit. Texas is great academically. There's a lot to like about Texas for that family. So I'm not counting Texas out, but I definitely have, as it stands right now, have Texas running third behind Notre Dame and USC.
All right, Jason. Barb's 10 has a question and kind of a dream, but you know what? Dream on, Barb's 10. Fellas, I heard the name Sanchez come up again yesterday and have to ask, is there something to him not feeling Texas? Was it more than that? This is Devin Sanchez, the badass cornerback that is committed to Ohio State.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he never felt Texas, Barbs. He did visit. It was early. He was like a sophomore or something, maybe in his I remember meeting him and his dad, really cool family. And I actually kept up with his dad even after he committed to Ohio State. Just, I mean, good dude and just straight shooter. But yeah, Texas just kind of faded in that one. I mean, there was a time early on they were interested, but Texas faded and just was not really a factor. I don't know why. Those aren't questions. I didn't ask, I don't want to call Devin or call his dad and be like, hey, why don't you like Texas? That's kind of homerish if I do that. So what's wrong with you, kid? But he just never, some guys just don't have these strong vibes or connections with programs. And for whatever reason, Devin just wasn't ever really feeling Texas that strongly. They were just never a real legitimate threat in his recruitment.
Jason, for the record, if Texas gets Hilson, Owusu Boateng, and flips Devin Sanchez and Riley Pettyjohn, number one class?
Yeah, but that's a pipe dream of all pipe dreams.
Just for the record.
Yeah.
Look,
I think Pettyjohn's going to be
coming up. All right.
Yeah, I think Pettyjohn's going to be tough to flip. I think Devin Sanchez is going to be damn near impossible to flip. So yeah.
Look, Christmas is coming up.
Hey, you never know, Chad.
The Longhorns went to the big house and went 8 of 10 on third down in the first half. Yeah. Like, they're thinking anything's possible today. I had to throw it out.
We've got teenage children. We know how they can flip-flop back and forth, right? So yeah, exactly. So.
Right. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Thank you for that chat and that question. Here's an interesting one from Phil, Jason. Do great games in the NFL by Overshone and Sweat help in recruiting? Baldinger called Sweat his top D lineman on Sunday. Do you think recruits, we always ask, do recruits care about what the current team is doing? Like what Texas or Baylor or Michigan is doing. Do you think they look that far ahead into what these guys do in the NFL?
The quick answer is no, I don't think so. Now, what they will recognize is, oh man, Texas had a bazillion players drafted, and I'm watching this game. Damn, there's a lot of Longhorns out there, and the Texas coaches can be like, hey, look at our development. We are putting guys in the league at a very, consistent pace of large numbers. So, but I don't think one game by Sweat and one game by Overshone, which by the way, great performances. I looked at the stat leaders yesterday, like tackle leaders, because I play fantasy football and we do individual defensive players. So I always like to look like, all right, what guys are, I don't want one guy who had a 90-yard interception return because that skews his scores, right? That's probably not going to happen the rest of the year. So I look for guys who are accumulating tackles on a consistent basis. DeMarvin Overshone, I think, was like, I don't even remember, top 10 in the league. I mean, it's 1 week, right? But so what a performance by DeMarvin. Good for him. But no, to answer the question, Phil, I don't think especially 1 week is going to impact players. If these players or these recruits are watching NFL on Sunday, like, holy cow, every time I look up, there's Texas Longhorn players and these guys are making plays, then I think the cumulative effect could maybe help Texas. But I don't think 1 week is going to change anything.
All right, Jason, one of the chatters wants to revisit a guy from out in East Texas. And I'll admit I'm a sucker for the Lufkin guys. I lived in Lufkin for about a year. And any Lufkin there's been Lufkin connections with A&M. There's been badasses come from Lufkin and go a lot of different places. So somebody just wants to check back in on this Zion Williams thing. Any chance of flipping him from LSU?
The talk with Zion has really kind of died down. I need to hit him up and hit up his coaches, and especially with Texas landing Myron Charles, kind of similar profile type players. I wouldn't say there's not a chance because Zion has talked, back when he committed to LSU about, I think that was on July 4th, actually. Yeah. Hey, I still am going to take a Texas official visit, but, these numbers are getting pretty tight. I mean, Texas still wants more interior defensive linemen. I don't think they would turn Zion away, but there just hasn't been quite as much buzz, if you will, just chatter behind the scenes on Twitter, anywhere else about Zion flipping from LSU to Texas. But, he's another guy. I mentioned Framo. He's another guy I need to put some feelers out on just to see if there's anything new. We're a couple games into the season now.
Right.
Guys might kind of start setting up official visits, but I don't, my gut instinct tells me I think it's unlikely, Kenny, but I'm not saying there's no chance by any means, especially if they bring him in for an official visit. Texas is serious, and he's still serious. Okay, so if he comes in, I want to see if he's coming in for an official visit, because he did not take an official visit to Texas in the summer.
Interesting question. Thank you, Kenny. That was actually, let me make sure I get that right. Kenny. Was that Kenny Joe? Like, that's the first name hyphenated? Well done, Kenny Joe. I like that. That's got a good little twang to it, Kenny Joe. All right. Here's one. Just quick revisit. David, got to keep these names in. You never know. Sanchez future visit?
That would surprise me, David, but
Okay.
I haven't even kicked the tires on that one because it seems so far-fetched to me. But again, he and his dad are pretty straight shooters. I could probably find that out pretty quickly, but he seems really, really happy with his Ohio State commitment.
Oh, I love it, man. Texas fans right now are like Christmas morning. The car is sitting in the driveway with a giant bow on it, and it's like the most badass high-level Mercedes that can exist. And they turn to their parents and go, "About a Lambo? Yeah?
Yeah.
Is there a Porsche in the garage? Yeah? What's going on?"
Yep, true story, Chad. I actually did that for my wife one day. I got her a car on Christmas Day. The guy was nice enough. He'd deliver it with a big bow, but it was a Buick.
Yeah, it's a little different. Okay, all right. And she didn't turn to you and ask for a Mercedes.
No. She was, believe it or not, she was happy with the Buick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There you go. We thank everybody for jumping in on the chat. If you want to send us a super chat, it'll go right to the top of the list. So, Jason, let's circle back around to Michael Terry. Any other information on Terry? He would be, let me see if I get it right. He's the Alamo Heights kid, or am I mixing him up with somebody else?
No, he's Alamo Heights, correct.
That's
Yep.
right. Okay.
Yeah, there is some new developments there. He visited Nebraska last week. Nebraska hosted Colorado. It was an unofficial visit. He's already taken his official visit, but he went up there for a game. And in talking to people who know Michael Terry and his family, in checking with like Nebraska sources, and sometimes these school sources, they always feel good about the way things went, right? But there's a real vibe coming out of Nebraska that they really made another strong impression on this visit last weekend. Apparently, Terry really liked, just obviously Nebraska got the win. They look good. They got a good young quarterback in Dylan Raiola. But just the way the program's run. Okay, Matt Rule, he just kind of got this thing as a well-oiled machine, almost the way it was described. So there's some thought that Nebraska now is dead even with Texas. Oregon now is maybe dipped down into third place. So Nebraska is a very formidable opponent in this one for Texas. Now, Texas is supposed to get him on campus for the Georgia game. There's talk that Michael Terry might still visit Oregon. There's talk that he might go back to Nebraska for another game. So if that happens, I'm like, whoa, watch out. But we'll see. Texas will have its chance to kind of move things back in the UT direction when he comes in for that Georgia game, assuming he does still come in, that's been the plan for a few weeks. So I think it'll happen. But right now, the most interesting part is he did visit Nebraska, and everything I'm hearing, not from Michael directly, but just other people, is that Nebraska really did a good job on that visit, maybe put themselves on even footing with Texas.
Interesting. So do you think deep down, like Matt Rule was crushing film on Colorado and he thought, boy, I'm glad Terry's coming this weekend. How many recruits can we get to come in this weekend to watch what we're going to do to Colorado?
Yeah.
That's a great showcase moment for them to have, and to have a big time offensive guy, Jason, to come in. Obviously, the rep for Nebraska at one point was a certain badass kind of offense, but they haven't been that lately, but they look great against Colorado.
Yeah, and I'm not sure Colorado's that great, but I mean they dominated that game.
Oh, yeah.
Nebraska did, and Dylan Raiola's looked really good in his 2 starts now. So if you're Michael Terry, you're like, okay, that's the play of that guy impacts me because I'm going to be a receiver, or he's going to be handing off to me, whatever. So Texas obviously has Arch Manning to sell, so it's not like Texas has any shortage of quarterbacks, but that does make Nebraska maybe more attractive to Michael Terry when he says, okay, at least if I go there, I'm not going to some desert wasteland of quarterbacks that aren't going to be able to get me the ball. So, Texas has its own quarterback stable that it can sell. But I'm telling you, Nebraska's making this one really interesting. And I said, I think it was just yesterday, I was on Anwar's show, and the plan had always been for Michael Terry to commit before his senior season began. Now it's like, nope, he's probably going to take this thing into December. Okay, there was talk that he was going to commit before his senior season began, and the talk all summer was that Texas leads. Well, if Texas leads, and if he wanted to decide before his senior season began, why hasn't he been able to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and just be like, okay, I'm going to commit to Texas? Something's keeping him, if all this talk is true, and you've never heard Michael say that, to be fair. That's just people speculating or other sources. But if the talk of Texas is leading was true in the summer, the talk of him wanting to commit in the summer, he just hasn't been able to get himself over the hump to make that final decision. So that tells me there's still some doubt out there. He's still unsure of what he wants to do. So I'm telling you, I'm looking at this Nebraska thing, Chad. I think they are a bigger threat than maybe Texas fans realize. You know, I know proximity obviously helps Texas. Michael's really close to his family, but they've been to Nebraska a couple times. They're talking about going to Oregon. So it's not like they don't have the means to get back and forth to places. But if you're a Texas fan, I know we've talked a lot about Texas being in the lead. Don't sleep on Nebraska in this one.
And Jason, isn't it also true that Nebraska is fairly well dialed in on the NIL stuff? Like they're certainly not that they're elite, not that they're at the top, but they're certainly not anything to sneeze at when it comes to NIL.
Well, I don't know the specifics, but they got Dylan Raiola, and that was shortly after Matt Rule was like, hey, you're going to have $1 million to get a quarterback. And then shortly after that, Dylan Raiola signed with Nebraska. So, you know, that Nebraska fan base is pretty rabid, and they are starved for success. So I would think they have pretty deep pockets. And, you know, that's a misconception about Texas too. I mean, listen, Texas has NIL, some pull there, but people just think Texas has unlimited NIL funds. They don't. It's not as glamorous as people think in terms of the just deep pockets at Texas. I mean, there are a lot of other programs. Oregon, I mean, Texas A&M's got them. A lot of these SEC programs, Georgia, and probably a school like Nebraska, Ohio State, that are probably on par, maybe even better than Texas in terms of NIL situations.
All right, let's grab a quick chat here. Then we'll talk about a guy making a decision this week. Jareth jumped in, one of my favorite names that chats in. Jareth. Sounds so official. Good morning, y'all. Chad, Jason. Javion Osborne going to schedule an OV anytime soon?
No, Javion is the class below. So he wouldn't be he's 2026. He's a running back out of Forney, really good player. I think Texas is in a great spot there. But he's likely not going to. I mean, I would assume he'll take his visits in June. Most people do. He could wait till this time next year. But yeah, he'll be taking. Who's that from? Sorry, Jareth. Jareth. He'll probably take as a visit to Texas and other places next summer.
There you go. We appreciate that chat. If you want to throw us a super chat, it'll go right to the top of the list. Uncle Mickey is just throwing in a hook'em emoji for the hell of it. What's up, Uncle Mickey? I believe Uncle Mickey is one of our chatters and viewers north of the border. So hope things are going well in Canada, if I'm right on that one. All right. Speaking of north, Jason, let's talk about a guy that is from an area that's north of you, me, and a lot of folks probably that are watching right now. Kid out of the Dallas area, a badass DB that's going to make a choice tomorrow. And I dig the name, Zealous Hicks. That's nice.
He's out of Carrollton, Georgia. Carrollton, Georgia.
Oh, Georgia? Wait a minute. Hold on.
I was like, wait a second. Chad, do you know something I don't know? Yeah.
Damn it. I saw Carrollton earlier and I moved on. I'm like, DFW kid. That's great. My bad. Well, Carrollton, Georgia. Sorry.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. You may not be too far off, and I'll come back to that, but just hold that thought. So Zealous Hicks is a safety out of Carrollton, Georgia. He's a borderline 5-star type player, number 30 nationally. The word is he's going to reclassify to the 2025 class. Okay. He's 2026 right now, but there's some talk that he's going to go ahead and reclassify. And I heard that back in June when I was down in Jacksonville for the Rivals 5-star. Zealous visited Texas. Let me see if I've got this date on his profile. See if I can get this correct. Sorry. Yes. Okay. It was April 13th of this year. He came in. They had a recruiting deal. And I remember I interviewed him after that. And he really, really likes Texas. His parents really, really like Texas. He then came back in June 1st for a recruiting event for Texas. He was in Auburn, though, in late July. Here's what's interesting. When he came in April and I talked to him, he said, yeah, like he has an aunt up in the Dallas area, maybe Carrollton, I don't know. And she was a former district attorney, I believe it was, in, I think it was Dallas County. So his parents, they've got some connections to the state of Texas. His parents kind of said he said, my parents are going to move to Texas when I go to college, no matter where I go to college. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm sure they'd love to have you down the street in Austin, down I-35 in Austin, right? So he's supposed to announce tomorrow. I put some feelers out yesterday. Nobody truly knows. Like one person, and this is kind of the way I read it too, but said they think it's going to be Auburn. Okay. I think it's going to be Auburn. So I'm on the same page as this person, but I'm not ruling Texas out. I mean, this kid loved his visits to Texas, the whole connections to the state of Texas through his aunt and his parents wanting to be in Texas. I'm not ruling Texas out. I don't sit here. I don't have a commitment story written and ready. I'm trying to figure out what time he's going to announce. I'm trying to work on some of these details, but there seems to be a lot of Auburn buzz. He's visited Auburn a lot. He was there in late July when that little 1 week window of the dead period opened up. So that seems to be the focus, but I think Texas is still very much involved there. Alabama's involved, Clemson, Georgia. I think maybe it'll come down to Auburn and Texas, but Zealous, he's a tough kid to read. He doesn't really tip his hand too much.
You know what, Jason? That would be a really wonderfully devious thing to say to Hicks when you're talking to a kid from Georgia and you say, I guess your parents would love to be right down the road.
3 hours.
To describe Dallas to Austin is down the street. That's fantastic. Well done.
It's only a 3. That's in Texas. That's a short little drive in Texas. In Georgia, he's probably in a different state to 3 hours. Yeah.
And we all know, and we would all tell Zealous Hicks that if there's one street that is always clear and free of traffic,
nothing.
And construction, 35, it's always just
smooth sailing. You're the only car on the road. That's right. Yes.
You feel like you're the only one out there. Zealous Hicks. One thing I like, Jason, obviously I did a bad job of reading the hometown properly, but if I'm reading the height and weight properly, a 6'3" safety stands out. I love the DBs that are 6 foot and above, big wingspan and the arms and everything. Is this how you see him projecting into college? Is he going to be like a badass safety in college, or is this a guy that might spin down to a linebacker?
That's a really good question. I've never thought of it like that, but he does have some Jonah Williams to him. Okay, he can play receiver. He can obviously can be a safety. Could he be kind of that hybrid safety linebacker? Yeah, I think he could be. I don't know the answer long term how he'll be used. But another thing about Zealous, he's a really strong, I think academics are going to matter to him. So I think that's something Texas can sell. Again, I'm not picking Texas, but I am by no means ruling Texas out in this announcement tomorrow. And to be fair, I don't think the recruitment will be over no matter what he does tomorrow. But to answer your question, Chad, yeah, he does bring some versatility with him. I think he'll come in as a DB, but depending on how his body feels out, yeah, he could do some different things. Maybe you kind of move him into some linebacker situation on certain roles. And there's definitely some position versatility there.
There you go. Zealous Hicks, Carrollton, Georgia product. But
dude, when you were saying that, I was like, wait a second. Like my brain, I was like, who is committing out of Dallas area tomorrow?
That's what people are like. Why does Jason look like Chad's crazy right now? Because he is. That's why. So look for that tomorrow. Sounds like sounds like you may want to wear a white helmet. We'll see if could it be the Texas white helmet or the Auburn white helmet. We'll find out maybe tomorrow on that one. All right, Jason, we've covered a lot of ground. Anything else we need to hit in this recruiting hour?
No, I think we've covered most of it. Texas is at home this week. I need to work on compiling. I got so many irons in the fire, but compiling a visitor list. I think there'll be some committed guys on campus this week. I don't know it's going to be a huge recruiting weekend. Texas is kind of saving a lot of its bullets for that Georgia weekend, but we'll start working on that. We'll have coverage of that, in the war room throughout the week. And then guys who do show up to visit Texas, we'll certainly be working the phones on Sunday to see what they think.
There you go. Texas and UTSA, 6:00 kick on ESPN. You like Texas to cover this thing, 34, 35 points?
I do. I started breaking down my matchups yesterday, made some phone calls, and I talked to some UTSA people, and even they were in agreement. Like, I'm surprised it's that low. I thought it'd be higher. So, yeah, this to me has a name your score. I watched some of that Texas State UTSA game last week, and Texas State just, made it look really, really easy. Yeah, I think this is a name your score type of thing for Texas. We'll see. I think Sark respects uh, Jeff Traylor. He probably doesn't want to embarrass in-state programs. Maybe Sark calls off the dogs a little early, but if both teams play their hardest, I think Texas probably covers this game.
Jason, real quick before we wrap up, we are recording this show on September 11th. Hard to believe it's 23 years ago that was September 11th. I know you're a Yankees guy. You've been to New York, and I think recently you may have even been to the museum or
The
at least
Memorial. Yeah, I've done it 3 times. I went with my wife once, and boy, I mean, the first time we went, and I don't know if you've done it, Chad. I mean, I came out of there. I'm not kidding. You feel like you went to your best friend's funeral. It's just heart wrenching. And then I went again with my youngest daughter. She was real, or I'm sorry, my middle daughter. She was real young. Took her up there. This is 3-4 years ago to see a Broadway play. Never in my life would I thought I'd be doing that. But trying to be a good dad, she wanted to go see a Broadway play, so we went and saw a Broadway play. Last year, if you remember, you and I talked a bunch. I took my daughter to a Yankees game. Or I guess that was April of this year. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And she wanted to go to the Memorial, so we did again. And she really took her time. Whereas when I went with my middle daughter, we kind of blew through it. But my oldest daughter really took her time. And I mean, again, it was my 3rd time there, and just super impactful. And yeah, this day is always just a heart-wrenching day, and just a day to kind of remember what happened in 9/11. But yeah, tough deal. I highly recommend it if you ever get up there. Of all the things I've seen and done in New York, that memorial is probably the one thing that I remember the most and the most impactful.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, my dad and I did one of those tours there of the site. It's just incredibly emotional, and we certainly thinking of all those families that were affected and are still affected to this day. September 11th, back in 2001, and we record here on this September 11th. We hope everybody has a great September 11th. We hope you have a great weekend, including Texas and UTSA, and we'll be back next Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. with the very latest on recruiting. Hey, depending on what happens around the country, you just never know what kind of flips and reactions are going to happen. So keep your eyes peeled for whatever happens. In fact, there is one more game I should mention, Jason, for Texas fans to pay attention to. When does it kick? Where is it? I know it's here. Hang on. Hold on. There it is. 11 a.m. ESPN, Memphis at Florida State. If the former coach, if the former school of the current coach comes to Tallahassee and beats Florida State, they may lose their whole recruiting class. And it may not all go to Texas, but just keep your eye on it, Texas fans.
And it's crazy. Like, we didn't mention Kevin Wynn, who's a defensive tackle of Florida State, who people think he's going to flip. It's probably going to be Georgia. This is a team that last year, that if their quarterback doesn't get hurt, is playing in the college football playoffs, right? I don't know, like it's 2 weeks into the season, and then just like everybody's like, oh, now that program's dead. I'm like, man, have people forgotten where they were last year? I mean, I wouldn't give up on Norvell so quickly necessarily, but they're definitely struggling this year. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting game to watch there. That's another 11 o'clock kick. All right, until next week, it is the Recruiting Hour. A reminder, House Divided coming up at 12. Football with Friends at 6, and there's an Outsiders episode tonight with all the picks, including Texas and UTSA. Y'all have a great week. We will see you next week on the Recruiting Hour. Until then, everybody take care.